This is the School Success Podcast, a podcast for school leaders to learn from other school leaders what's working and what's not, and to get inspiration and encouragement, as well as strategies to grow school enrollment, connect with families, retain teachers, recruit teachers, and everything in between. You guys are heroes, and I cannot thank you enough for pouring into this next generation that's coming behind us. My goal is you will take at least one thing away from every episode that you can take back to your school to make it better than it is right now. Please enjoy the School Success Podcast. Hey, School Success Makers. Welcome to another edition of the School Success Podcast. I'm your host, Mitchell Slater. I'm joined by a new friend, Ryan Ermeling, who is the owner of ParentPulse, which is an awesome software that I got to see firsthand. He did a demo for me, and I was like, oh man, I need to make sure this gets in front of the audience, you School Success Makers, for you guys to go check it out online and see it. And I was like, well, I need to have an interview with him. But before I pass it off to him to introduce himself, I do want to highlight our amazing sponsor, America's Christian Credit Union. You guys have heard them before because I've mentioned it on the past episodes, but this year they are celebrating 65 years of service, and they are serving Christians from all over the country, and they are super specific in wanting to help schools, obviously Christian schools specifically, and they help with one thing called tuition financing programs for schools. And what they do is they're helping to reduce the risk and administrative burden for you and your school. If you guys are chasing people every year to try and get their tuition dollars at the end of the year, and maybe you get 95% of the tuition that you were owed when you really needed that 100%, that's a lot of money left on the table. And so what they do is they come in and they offer tuition financing loans to your families, and they go to America's Christian Credit Union. They get that done. You get all the money as the school, and then you don't have to worry about chasing money or going after anybody for that. That's what they handle for you because it is a loan that they're taking care of for the tuition financing. A super cool thing that they're offering. I want you guys to go check them out. You can see them online at americaschristiancu.com/schools. That's americaschristiancu.com/schools. All right. Well, now it's time for me to pass it off to my guest to introduce himself, and we dive into this episode. So, Ryan, welcome to the podcast, sir.
Thanks, Mitchell. Great to be with you. Appreciate the invite and love the chance to connect with you and your audience. And you asked for the quick intro. So I am an entrepreneur by trade, have had a couple of startups and now really excited with ParentPulse. I'm first and foremost, ParentPulse is focused on Christian schools. You mentioned your sponsor and their passion and focus on Christian schools. That is our focus. I'm a product of Christian schools from preschool through college and passionate about that. My wife's a 25-year Christian educator and really set out to try to figure out a way to help these schools. And so ParentPulse is our answer to really helping schools think about their parents as customers, right? How do we constantly leverage this idea that in a private school setting, your parents are paying money for a service, right? By definition, they're a customer. And so really creating a platform to help our schools with that. But so entrepreneur by trade, father of 3 girls, 2 in college, and another 10-year-old that's keeping us young here at home, and live in the Phoenix, Arizona area, Gilbert specifically, and after a brief 4-year stint in Vegas, but Arizona is home for us. So that's the quick intro, and happy to fill in any gaps if I left any in there.
Love it. Well, I've been to Arizona a few times. I love Arizona, specifically your area I've been to. If I was to obviously, I didn't do a ton when I was there, but if I was to come visit you in Gilbert area, what would you say, Mitchell, you got to do this when you come to Gilbert to get the full experience?
Well, I mean, listen, I'm a huge golf fan. So the first thing I would do is take you to 3 or 4 different golf courses, not necessarily in Gilbert, but in the area. I mean, it's if you love golf, you can't beat Phoenix area, of course. But there's some other cool things. Gilbert is just a small fun fact. It's the largest town. It's incorporated as a town. It's the largest town in America. I think it's 275,000 people or so, but kind of actually a growing foodie scene. We've got a little downtown area with a lot of cool eclectic restaurants and areas to eat. And it's a family town, a lot of young families. So if you got kids, there's some cool things to do. But yeah, I would, listen, I'm going to start with golf every day. So if there's one thing you got to do, we're going to go play Dinosaur Mountain out in Gold Canyon and have some fun out there.
Sounds good. I mean, I live in South Florida, so you know that I'm an expert golfer. Not really. I've golfed probably 7 times in my life, but I love it. I do truly love it. I'm not great at it, but hanging out, my wife doesn't get it because I say, oh man, golf is so much fun. She's like, but you're not really great at it yet. And I was like, I know, but to hang out with some guys on a golf cart for 4 or 5 hours, just taking your time and hanging out, like that is super, super fun to me. And she's like, that sounds like so boring. And I was like, nah, it's just, I enjoy it very, very much. So
When your biggest stress is, am I going to make this 9-foot putt? I mean, that's a good day, right? So I can't beat that.
I agree. I agree. Well, diving into kind of Parent Pulse. So, audience, obviously, I met Ryan and I loved what he offers, and I've encouraged clients that we work with in that school space is like, hey, you need feedback. You need this feedback from your parents. I mean, yeah, you want a Google review and some of these other things, but it's more than that. You want, what are certain things that we can do as a school to fix now so we don't lose a family later. And I've actively told clients like, hey, like send out a text, send out something to your families, not at the end of the year because it might be too late by that point, but what's something you can do earlier than that to say, hey, how are we doing as a school? And what are things we can add or do to be better or make your experience better? And when I saw your product, I was like, oh my gosh, this solves that problem for schools because it's so user friendly and it solves that problem for schools to be able to have data to go off of. So I kind of love just, let's dive into, before I get into like the three main questions I typically kind of hover around in the episodes, is kind of dive into Parent Pulse a little bit and what you guys specifically have come in and solved, even though I kind of just shared that, but like what you specifically solved for schools.
I'm going to hire you as a salesman. No, you hit the nail on the head, right? I think the biggest problem we're solving for is this, right? Most schools, if they survey their parents, and by the way, we're moving into other stakeholder groups too. We're going to be adding this summer student and staff survey modules as well, but really focusing first and foremost on the parent as customer. But most schools, they do surveys. It's usually once a year. And to your point, it's usually in the spring. You get this data that it's often too late to do anything about it that year. You get all these survey responses at once, more comments than you know what to do with, right? Sometimes it's overwhelm and it's paralysis, just trying to sort through all this data, right? And so we've solved for that by creating this AI where it's a drip campaign. So you get your parents into our system. We automatically drip a handful of really short surveys every day to a small group of parents. And we do that for 90 days. At the end of 90 days, your entire parent group has been surveyed, and we reboot that cycle and we do it again. So you have these continuous 90-day cycles of feedback. We encourage schools to keep some of their questions the same. We encourage schools to change some of them each cycle, right? But we do want you to track certain key things that are really important to your school so you understand those trajectories throughout the year. You can pivot, you can adapt, you can make changes mid-year rather than waiting till May when there's, to your point, you might have lost some families that you had no clue they were on the fence of leaving, right? We want you to capture that data, that information earlier, be able to engage with those families and have those opportunities to constantly use that data to drive better retention, more alignment, just make your school a better place.
And look at how quickly too it pays for yourself. Not saying, I know pricing varies based on school size, I think, for how you guys price it out, but let's just talk about even just that. So audience, like as you're listening, like think about, and this goes for public schools and private schools that are listening, like how much each student is worth to your school. I know we hate to look at it, hate to look at it that way, but obviously there's, schools have to make money to be able to pay their bills. And so, I've seen schools, $6,000 a year is what they're either getting paid or the state's giving them, or I've seen some as high as 20, 30,000 we've had on the podcast before talking. So we got these tuition dollars that we're talking about. And we're saying, like, can we send out a survey to a family and say, maybe we save two of them from leaving? Well, let's say for easy math, it's $10,000. You just saved your school $20,000 because you sent out a survey about something a parent was upset about that you were able to solve with a quick meeting in your office, but they didn't want to share it, or they wouldn't have shared it because you didn't ask. And then they leave and you're like, oh, I wonder what happened. And you could have just saved yourself $20,000. And it goes a step further. This kind of goes back to the marketing step that I tell schools is when you're missing phone calls and when you're missing things that you're not handling, people who are interested in your school, like what you miss out on is bigger than just the $10,000. Because I always ask these schools, I say, well, how much is your tuition? Let's say it again, it's $10,000. Well, how long is a student typically with your school? Let's say the average is 4 years. Well, we're not talking about $10,000. Then we're talking about that student's worth $40,000 over the course of their lifetime at the school as an average. So when you miss a phone call, when you miss one of these families that leaves after a year or whatever, we're talking tens of thousands of dollars with one family that could be leaving the school, and we can solve it with a simple software that comes in there and takes care of that problem, or hits it right on the head. This is why I love this. That's why I want schools to really look at whether they're using ParentPulse or not. Like, you need to be asking these families, like your clients, your customers, which is what they are, how are you doing and how can you make it better? I'll get off my soapbox, but pass it off to you, Ryan. What are you thinking?
Well, I was waiting for your follow up, which was exactly what I was hoping you would get. Right, it's not just that 1 year's worth of tuition. Right, you're now engaging and keeping families in their long term, so it's compounding interest. Right, and the nice thing too is with ParentPulse, we call it more than just a survey platform. It's an engagement platform. One of the unique things that you can do as these comments come in from your parents, they have the opportunity to leave open-ended comments in each survey. And again, you're not getting 200-300 at once because this is a drip campaign, a handful a day. But you can actually reply to parents directly within our platform, and even anonymous parents that want to submit a survey anonymously, you can still reply and engage and have back and forth dialogue with them without them having to disclose their identity if they're not comfortable with that. And so you think about the power of that, right? The ability to on the fly really engage and reply to concerns, ideas, frustrations, whatever it is a parent might want to share throughout the year. I think that really does lead to what we say is one of the key benefits of this: retention, right? You have the opportunity to flag families that might be on the fence or might have concerns long before they just pick up and leave and head to another school. So that's a major benefit.
Yeah. And I think everybody, and I'm sure you've heard this before, what's cheaper, to retain current people or to go get new ones? And every time it's cheaper to just keep the ones you have. And so can we invest in that? And obviously as a school, you should be caring about all your families and want that feedback. Like, I always tell clients, just talking about the Google review side, is like, hey, you want that feedback. Even though that bad review stings, like, you do want that feedback because you want to be able to improve and get better. And so this is what this is doing without having to be a public review, which is also awesome. So I typically shuffle between like those three main questions that for each interviewer. So from you being doing this for a while, what have you kind of seen as different challenges that schools have faced in this realm that you're kind of touching on? Is there different challenges you've seen them face and that they're stuck on?
Yeah, usually when it comes to collecting feedback from parents, we find schools struggle with two things. One is time, one is expertise, right? So time, you think about all the steps involved in really crafting and creating a healthy feedback rhythm, right? You got to find what tool you're going to use or what vendor, if you're going to use a vendor to help with the survey, right? You've got to think, you've got to figure out, who's going to help in the process and who's going to write the questions and when you're going to send it out. And so there's just time involved in creating this whole process. The other side is expertise, right? I've yet, and maybe there's one out there, but I've yet to meet a head of school that's got a master's in data science, right? And yet we're asking these heads of school to be able to write effective questions, to know when a question is leading or biased, when there's a double-barreled question, to know how long a survey should be, when it should be sent out, what types of questions to use, right? There's a lot of expertise required to really to create an instrument that's going to yield valid and helpful data. And so we've created a library of questions that schools can choose from. We cap our surveys at 20 questions. We do a lot of things based on advice and counsel from our data scientists that we work with to really eliminate the need for some of that expertise. And then the time savings are immense, right? It's an auto drip campaign. You get your parents in there, it's auto sending. You don't touch it again. You just get to reap the rewards of this data constantly coming in. So I'd say those are the two big things we're trying to solve for, is time and expertise.
Man, and you nailed it exactly on the head. All the ones I've talked to, people I've had on the podcast, time is of the essence. And that's, even though they want to spend time on that, they're going to take most of the time the ones that are pressing, like teacher issues or student direct issues in the school. And like this one might take the back burner, which it really shouldn't, but I get it, like why it would. So this is something to be able to set it and forget it. How long would you say does it take average to like get them up to get them launched? If they were to sign up and say, hey, we're going to launch this and get it started, how long does it typically take?
I mean, it's a really quick process, right? We say generally there are three things you need to do. One is import your data, your parents, into our system, which is a straightforward process. You just do an export from your student information system, and you've got everything in our system. Creating the survey itself, again, we have a really intuitive survey builder. I think you saw that when we walked through a brief product overview. you can write your own questions, but we also have a library of great questions that have been professionally written as well. So just crafting that quick survey, which again, we have you refresh every 90 days. But then the third thing we have schools do is just send out an update, a type of communication to their parents, to their families, saying, here's what we're doing, but also including the why in there. It's such a great opportunity for the why. And the why, we have language we encourage schools to use, they can tweak it. But the why is, hey, we care about your opinion. We don't want to do this once a year deal, which is kind of a check the box approach. We really want to have a constant living feedback platform, a program, a rhythm where we're always listening and hearing what's on your hearts and minds. And so really communicating that piece to the parents is the third part. So it can be a really quick turn up process. We've had schools within a matter of, a day or two really click and start, and they're off to the races. So pretty quick.
And that's something you guys build with them, or they're fully on their own to build it out?
No, we have a very, very white glove service approach. That was in my first business that I built. We were all about customer service. And so we've taken that to ParentPulse as well. So it is a typical software as a service platform, meaning you can do it all on your own, but we're very hands-on in the onboarding and continuous support of the platform as well, just to make sure our schools are well versed, that they know how to use it well, that they're gleaning the right insights out of it. We meet with them every 90 days over Zoom just to review kind of their findings and make sure they're uncovering any type of hidden insights in there to really, again, help them use this data effectively.
Love it. Love it. Well, talk about the challenges. What do you see kind of going really good? Has there been really good case studies at all that have come out of what you've done? Just like really cool success stories that you've seen schools have with this?
Yeah, I think, one of the first schools, so we've been doing this for about 13 months. We launched in March of 2022, right? So this is really the close of our first full academic year coming up. So starting to get some of the feedback and numbers and see how this is really impacting schools. I think one of my favorite stories comes from a school here in the Phoenix area, North Valley Christian Academy. It's a K through 12 school, about 800 kids or so. And by the way, we work with schools from, I think, as few as 57 students all the way up to over 1,200. So this really is designed to help schools of all sizes. But North Valley Christian Academy and their head of school, talking with him, he said, hey, this is interesting. He's like, I don't have an exact way to track it, but anecdotally, he's like, listen, we went up 20% in enrollment from last year to this year. And I've been replying to these parent comments as they come in. And I've noticed about a 20%, even with that 20% increase in enrollment, I've noticed a 20% decrease in putting out fires, talking to parents in my office with issues and problems. And so that, I think, is pretty cool, right? He's investing a little bit of time every week just replying to comments and engaging parents as they bring concerns or ideas forward. But that's really eliminated gossip, put out fires much more quickly, and eliminated the time he's dealing with some of those potential headaches, right? So one principal coined the term to me, the parking lot mafia, right? And if you see all these parents sometimes gather or congregate outside in a parking lot, and they start gossiping and they get animated, and sure enough, one of them makes a beeline straight for the principal's office. And so I think his point is, hey, this is helping us maybe break up that parking lot mafia a little bit and really deal with some of those issues more proactively and systematically. So I think that's been a really cool story. One other one I'll share too, we have a unique way of leveraging this data to help our schools in marketing as well. When somebody submits a survey in our platform, if they're a promoter, which means, that it's that classic net promoter question, how likely are you to recommend us? If they give you a 9 or a 10 on that question, they're a raving fan. And so at the end of the survey, we give schools the opportunity to link to their Google review site or their Facebook or Great Schools or wherever they want. And we're only showing that link to those people who give you a 9 or a 10 on that question. And so we're prompting them to go and leave a review. And so again, another school I'm thinking of, Traders Point Christian in Indiana, saw, I think, about a 400% increase in their positive Google reviews since they've started working with us, right? So they're seeing this very organic increase in people who are going online, leaving reviews. And let's face it, that digital footprint you're leaving behind nowadays is so important, right? I don't know if necessarily people are making a choice in a school just on a Google review or Facebook review, but certainly that first impression when you type in a school's name in Google and see what comes up, 3.5 stars, 4.5 stars, whatever. I mean, that sticks in your mind a little bit, right? So we're using this to try to create a better digital presence for schools as well.
Man, and I know that's got to work, because think about just anybody who's listening, they go, to Amazon to buy a product, we're looking at reviews. We're looking at that when we go to a new restaurant. Like you're in general, that's ingrained in our minds. We want to see a good rating, especially if we're going to say, I'm going to pay for an education for my student, or I'm going to trust this person for 40 hours a week or 30 hours a week, whatever it is, my students at this school. I want to know this school is really, really good. And have you seen anybody in any of the schools you work with kind of lead with that they use a software like ParentPulse in these interviews that people come in for, or to like go tour the school? They're like, hey, just so you know, like we really care about you guys. We use a software that keeps track. Like, do you know if anybody's like kind of pushed that from the beginning to say how much they care about feedback from families?
Yeah, I don't know that we've heard that yet, although I hope we do hear that narrative. What we have heard, though, is one of the neat things you can do is you can export PDF of all the comments parents leave, and you can filter those comments by promoters, again, by your fans. So one thing we've heard a couple schools do is they'll sort all their comments that people leave on these surveys by promoters. So you're just seeing the positive ones and printing those out, and you can share that with parents on tour. Say, hey, here's some of the things our parents are saying, right? I don't think it's, some people said that's a little bit disingenuous when you're not showing all the comments, but I mean, that's marketing, right? I mean, you're not going to share all, negative feedback with prospects. You're going to share, hey, here's the things that people are saying are great about us that people love. And so what's nice is this is something you can share that's coming from actual parents in the school. This is not an admissions counselor or head of school or someone else who's sitting here trying to tell you how great this school is. You have a printout, you have some actual comments you can share. And these are recent comments, right? Because again, these are being dripped in every day. So you're not showing something 2 or 3 or 4 years old. You can say, hey, here's a comment just from 3 days ago that a parent left on our feedback platform. So we've seen more of that so far, but I would expect too that we will also see some schools really promote that as, yeah, we are feedback conscious. We do want to know, what you have to say, and we're going to give you that chance multiple times per year.
And they're not going to, if they push that and say, you're probably not going to find this at some of the other schools in the area, they're probably not. I just haven't really heard of people using something like this. I know you just started, you're just finishing your first full, year of a school year, but I hope more schools will adopt something. Again, even if I'm sure you're on the same fence, even if it's not ParentPulse, like they need to be doing something with like a simple email to their families just saying, how are we doing, just to start it. But obviously, I think ParentPulse will actually save them to even more time than doing an email and trying to manage it that way on their own. I know you mentioned some things earlier in the interview about some new things coming up where you're going to have student and faculty, I think is what you said. Tell us kind of what the future, I know you guys are a young company still, but like what's the future for ParentPulse that you're seeing on the horizon?
Yeah, I mean, I think our end game is to be your one-stop shop for data, for feedback, right? And so we started in a software development world, they call it the MVP, the minimum viable product, and really trying to, for us, that was the parent, right? Really seeing this idea that your parent is your customer, that feedback is so vital. But now really trying to create almost a three-legged stool, right? Or help you triangulate data and take these three stakeholder groups, your parents, your students, which we're actually working on some creative ways to help schools, maybe even kindergarten, first, second, even the younger grades do feedback, really simple emoji based, that type of thing. But using student feedback and then also staff feedback, right? And there's a lot of schools that have, work best in the workplace surveys and things like that, trying to get on lists and show that their employees, their staff, their faculty are engaged and happy. And so really trying to take some of those ideas too, but bring everything into one platform, right? So you can compare data, you can analyze how different stakeholder groups are responding, even the same questions, and really have everything kind of living under one roof. So that's our roadmap. We're really excited to be rolling out those other two survey modules this summer. So they'll be ready by this next academic year. And I think that's going to make a big, bold impact on our schools.
I love it. I see it only growing from here. And if the feedback is going to be valuable, especially when you're adding in students and teachers, like I feel like that's also something that's probably not, especially the student side, like getting feedback from them is like, obviously they're directly inside of there, love their feedback. I know some schools will be like, they're kids, it's like, yeah, but they still obviously are valuable. We need to know what they think of something. And
well, and there's a growing sentiment too, and I've heard this from many schools, especially high schools, that the students are the ones making the decisions about where they're going, right? Even though the parents are writing the check, I'm hearing more and more heads of schools saying, no, it's our students that are making this decision more often than you'd think, right? So I think it is important. Yes, the parents might be writing the check, but in some cases, those students are not just the consumer, but they might be the customer as well. They might be the one impacting or influencing that buying decision if we use the whole customer analogy there. And so I think it is important to really understand that impact, especially at the middle high school level, that those students can have.
Super good point. Well, I have two more questions for you. One, before my final question I ask you, but what are some of the, so people are listening, they're going, okay, I could ask people how they, what they think of this, or how are we doing at this? What are some really, really questions that you've seen schools do that you're like, wow, like that one was really thought out to go, they're asking families this. I've never seen a school ask that before. I guess making schools who are listening think, oh my gosh, I would love to know that from a family. I never thought to ask them that. Is there anything that kind of I'm throwing you a curveball, like that comes to mind to go, man, some schools are asking these specific questions and I've gotten great feedback from?
Yeah, I'd have to look, Mitchell, to see. I don't know that anything pops out in terms of custom questions I've seen from schools. There have been some good ones. I don't, my memory recall is not pulling those up. I will say there's a couple questions that we've introduced into the system, which I think get some really interesting and helpful data. The one that I love most is it's what we call demographic. It's actually more of a psychographic question. And it's this: what is the primary reason you chose our school? And it's multiple choice. We have schools pick usually no more than 5 things. But then the beautiful thing is you can filter on that question too. So let me, I guess, play that out a little bit for you. We're working with a lot of Christian schools, right? So they might say, what's the number one reason you chose our school? Faith-based education might be one answer. Athletic programs, affordability, geographic location, reputation in the community. Those are just some ideas. So even getting data on that, especially for like new school leaders, can be eye-opening, right? If you're like a first or second year administrator to school, sometimes you don't even know what you're good at. You don't even know why people are at your school, right? So that in and of itself can be eye-opening, and even more experienced heads of school that have used that question have really got some good insights. But then being able to filter by that. So what I mean is, as the rest of the survey data comes in, you can say, hey, I want to see what those people who said that faith-based education is the most important thing, how they're answering all the other questions in the survey. Or I want to see how people who said, hey, affordability is the most important thing for me, how are they answering the questions? So it helps you not just understand what's most important, but then how that could trickle down into their perceptions and understandings of other things in your school, right? And so that filtering mechanism, I think, is really cool. So don't know that I exactly addressed your question the way you were hoping, but that's just one example. Whether it's ParentPulse or some other platform, I think that's can be a really insightful question, just to try to drill down to what are the big things that we have going for us, right? Yeah. What would people say? Hey, this school is known for X. This is why we're here.
And man, I love that. And that was a curveball question I knew I gave you. So I was like, oh, that was good though, because it all comes back to data. And whether people want to hear that or not, it really is like data is everything with decisions we make and why we do things. It's why big companies make the decisions they make to launch products, pull products. And the same thing with a school of like, what is the data of like, what are people saying? They're the ones paying the bills. Like, what are they needing? What are they wanting? It's same thing like with some of the marketing we do for schools and the data we've pulled with the software we've created is we're giving schools data that they've never had at their disposal right away. And we've gotten such great feedback from our clients where we're saying like, hey, here's how many leads you got. Here's how many appointments were booked. Here's how many cancellations. Here's how many applications came in through the software. All these things that schools are like, oh my gosh, we'd never had a way of pulling this before unless we pulled out a spreadsheet or something. Like we have it because it's all digital. We can give schools now this data that they've never had before to make decisions on like, how much more marketing do we need to do? How many open seats do we have? So like it all just comes back to data. That's why I love this product and love what you're doing.
We have at the bottom of our homepage, parentpulse.com, we have a quote to your point by Peter Drucker: if you can't measure it, you can't improve it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I mean, and so, love what you guys do. And we got to learn a little bit more about your product as well. And you're spot on, right? I mean, to give schools that insightful analysis and data to help them better understand where opportunities are, where weaknesses are, where strengths are, being able to double down on those strengths or adjust where your weaknesses are. It can be eye-opening. So you're spot on.
Love it. Well, man, as we wrap it up, I always end with one final question. It's if you could share a piece of advice with the school leaders that are listening, what would you say to them?
Well, obviously we'd love schools to be more proactive and intentional about collecting feedback, but I take it one step further. Close the loop. We talk about the feedback loop. So it's one thing to actually collect feedback and analyze that feedback. But what we're really trying to encourage and educate schools on too is in closing that loop. Go back to your stakeholders and say, here's what we heard. Here's what we're going to do about it. And then after you do something about it, follow up again and say, hey, did what we actually do, did our action have the intended effect? Has it made a difference for you? And you gotta get in this cycle of a constant loop, right? It's not enough just to collect and analyze the feedback. It's in determining how can this inform action, even if it's low-hanging fruit sometimes, but then communicating that to your parents, keeping that feedback well oiled and going, because if you don't let parents know that, hey, here's what we heard and here's what we're doing, they're going to stop giving you feedback. So I guess that'd be the one piece of encouragement, whether you're using ParentPulse, whether you're doing an annual survey, whatever it is, make sure you're closing that loop, communicating with your parents, letting them know how their feedback is informing and driving action.
Man, solid, because that just happened today with me. My son's school, we just got an email this morning, my wife and I, from the head of school. We had a couple concerns we emailed them about. The head of school reached out and said, hey, can you come in? Let's talk about it in my office. We had a call, or we met with her last week, talked everything out through with an hour conversation, good conversation. And then she just emailed today and she's like, hey, just want to say thank you to both of you for coming in and bringing these up to us and we can fix. I'm always open to have another talk. Appreciate you guys, a family, blah, blah. Like, I was like, oh man, like didn't expect that. Like she kind of, like you just said, kind of closed that loop of like, okay, we had to talk. She was appreciative of it. We were appreciative of it. And then we move on like with it. And so she handled it really good. And obviously they're not using a software like yours, but hopefully one day they will. But I totally agree with that. Closing that loop is
love solid.
It. Well, Brian, I've loved this episode. Love this content. I think it's super valuable. I know it's super valuable. And I love what you're doing. So please keep doing what you're doing. Thank you for pouring into all these schools and helping them to get better feedback from their families. And I'm just wishing you and ParentPulse nothing but the best as you guys continue to grow and help Christian schools and schools all over the country, man.
Awesome. Thanks, Mitchell. Great to be with you today. Really appreciate the invite.
Well, again, another huge shout out and a thank you to Ryan for taking time and being on the podcast. I love what he's doing over at ParentPulse. I want you guys to go check him out online, parentpulse.com, and check out a little bit more of what he's doing over there. But love that software, love that service that he is giving to schools and showing to schools and providing to schools. So just really appreciate him for hopping on the podcast and being able to share with it. I hope you guys were able to take at least one thing from today's episode that you can take back to your school to make it better than it is right now, whether that is ParentPulse or you guys decide to do something very similar, but just use an email or text message. I just want you to do something. If you're not asking for feedback from your families yet and actively doing that every year, I want you to be doing that again, whether it's using his software or something else, please be doing that. If you guys are struggling in different areas of your school, we have some resources for you we want you to check out. One of those is, of course, our website, schoolsuccessmakers.com. Go over there and check it out. We have blogs. We have different articles. We're going to launch some courses soon. We're going to have so many different things. One of the other things is we're launching soon is our school success report card. It's going to be our weekly newsletter that comes out with school news and tips and shout outs and giveaways and fun stuff. So make sure you keep an eye on that on our website, the school success report card going out, so you guys can keep up on all things school related. We also have our private Facebook group, School Success Makers. We want you to go over there and check it out, join it. I'm personally in there. I want you to be in there too, so I can get to know you and get to meet you. But School Success Makers on Facebook, go over there. Please join our group. We'd love to connect with you in there. If you guys have any questions, comments, concerns, ideas, please send them to us. That'll be on our website, schoolsuccessmakers.com. We will be here next week with another amazing guest as usual on the School Success Podcast. We'll see you then.